Welcome back, story lovers, to another chapter of Right Now. This time, we're talking about the difference between genre and literary fiction. So grab that pen. We're diving in. Welcome back, everybody. So let's break down genre and literary fiction. So before we get into the big debate that's going on between these two fields of writing, first we need to really break down what exactly are they. So genre fiction, otherwise known as popular fiction, is basically category fiction. These are stories that fit into smaller groups, such as horror, sci-fi, romance. There are a plethora of subgenres such as steampunk and cyberpunk, which happen to be some of my favorite, and a whole bunch of others. You got mystery, you've got detective stories. On the other side of the debate, we have literary fiction, which is sometimes known as serious fiction, and this tends to focus on realism. These stories often tell tales that are grounded in day-to-day life, focusing on the ordinary, though that's not to say that they're necessarily boring. Personally, I don't like the term serious fiction because it implies that genre fiction is not serious, and ask any genre writer, that's just not true. They take their craft just as seriously as any of the literary fiction people. On the other hand, I also don't like literary fiction because it sort of gives the impression that anything that's not literary isn't literature, and that's also not true. I know that the first time I got into studying literary fiction, I had a hard time understanding the term because I thought all fiction was literary because it's all literature. And so the term itself is perhaps not the most accurate when trying to describe what the non-genre even is. As far as I'm concerned, these labels only really have importance when it comes to marketing and literature contests. When it comes down to the average buyer, I'm pretty sure that most readers really don't care about the distinctions between labels. Now, that's not to say that they aren't helpful. For example, if I want to find a spooky, scary story, I'm not going to be looking in the romance section. But that's also not to say that I don't want some kind of romance in my horror. So that really brings down a certain point. When writers focus way too much on the categories, horror, romance, comedy, etc., they tend to really zero in on the tropes, and that can really be detrimental to the craft because they're going to be missing out on a lot of other techniques that can be borrowed from the other genres or the non-genre. You can have a very compelling sci-fi story that's told with a very literary narrative voice. I don't really think of my writing in terms of, is this horror, is this literary, is this romance? I don't really think about that. I don't put the stories into a box. I just write my characters, I write their story, and if a ghost happens to show up, then a ghost happens to show up. So I'm sure that several of you have heard the different slanders that are thrown across this battlefield between genre and literary. Literary fiction is often labeled as boring and pretentious, and genre fiction is often called unserious and unrefined. And really, both of these slanders are just not true. When it comes down to it, some of the best written books blur the line between these two categories and several of the subcategories within them. For example, you have Ishiguro's Never Let Me Go, which is one of my favorite books. And this is technically sci-fi, although when I was reading it for a class in undergrad, we actually had a debate because we couldn't figure out if it really deserved to be in the category of sci-fi or not, because it read so much as literary fiction and the sci-fi was really nuanced. Now, this is a great example of a story that's wonderfully written with wonderful characters and a beautiful tale that really doesn't care about what side of the coin it falls on as far as this debate goes. So personally, as a reader, as a writer, I honestly do not care if a book is labeled as genre or literary. If it's well crafted and if the author takes this art seriously, then that's really all that's going to matter for a compelling and enjoyable story. So I have had the privilege to study both sides of this coin in undergrad and graduate school. I've studied both in workshops for literary fiction and for genre fiction. And I have noticed some tendencies in many of the apprentice writers. For example, the literary students tend to focus more on character-focused story, whereas the genre students tend to focus on world building. And both of these things are really great areas to focus on. Both of these areas are going to immensely increase the quality of your craft. I personally would love for both sides of this coin to focus on both elements, though. I would love for the genre fiction students to focus more on character, and I would love for the literary students to focus more on world building, so that both sides could have a very well balanced and well fleshed out tool belt for their story building. So let me know what you think in the comments down below. Do you agree with me that when it comes down to it, the differences between genre and literary and the different types of genre just really don't matter all that much? Do you like stories that blur all of these different fields together? Or would you like your fiction to have a bit more separation from different types of fiction around it? Let me know, and as always, till next time,